Hey, hello there, and welcome to Talking with Tony. It's May, at the beginning of May, which means we launch a brand new season here on Talking with Tony. It's season 16. And just as in the previous 4 years, our first episode of the new season is with our executive correspondent. We call him the world's most interesting man. He's in Tampa, Florida. He wears a lot of different hats for Talking with Tony, our hockey correspondent, our golf correspondent, one of our chief football correspondents. But we often refer to him as the executive correspondent and the world's most interesting man, Fred Blatchford. Fred, how are you today?
All right. How about you? Actually, I went diving last week, found another big tooth.
Tell us about it.
Well, it's this is the best time of year to go because you go through the entire winter where there's not a lot of folks down there. The ocean kind of stirs up a little bit. Plus, there hasn't been a lot of diving, a lot of capabilities of diving because the visibility's been so bad from the two hurricanes that went through. So we had a group all went down there last week, and the first dive came up basically empty-handed. The second dive, I don't know, I was probably 40 minutes into it, and the water temp's still about 70 degrees, so it's still pretty cold. And looked down, and I put my hand on it. It was kind of dusted over a little bit, so sometimes they'll sit flat, but it has some sediment, silt over and stuff like that. And I put my hand over it and was like, and it got to the top of the water, got in the boat. The thing was 5 inches. So, anything 5 inches and above is pretty rare. My biggest one ever is 5.5 inches. My goal is to find a 6 inch and then I'm retiring. I've actually held a 6 inch, but it wasn't mine. It was somebody else that found it. And, we're back in season. Speaking of starting of the season, the shark tooth diving season has started. Actually, I'm going next, not this weekend, but the following weekend is our second dive down there. So looking forward to it.
For people who haven't heard the story, can you explain to them? I know you've shared it here on Talking with Tony before on why and how old these teeth are and why
Yeah.
they do pop up now because the history lesson and all.
Yeah, they're for whatever reason, 3.6 million plus years ago, megalodon sharks lived in Venice, Florida, apparently. And there was a thing called a dugong. They're actually still alive. They're in Australia, but it was like a manatee, and everybody knows what a manatee is, but they're supersized. They're, 4 or 5 times bigger. And the megalodons used to eat those. It was a food source for them. And so apparently 3.6 million years ago and plus, dugons were there, and the manatee and the megalodons followed those around and ate them. And if you know anything about sharks, they'll put out about 20,000 teeth in their lifetime. If you've seen pictures of them, they just roll forward and fall out. Well, millions of years and millions of megalodons and time, they fell out. And Venice is kind of a unique geography where there's two rivers that actually come together in Venice, and then they dump out into the bay right there, for the lack of a better term, and it's created what a lot of people call the boneyard. And they started finding them about 10 years ago. I started doing it about 6 years ago, maybe. It's harder to find them. It's become a kind of a cottage industry down there in Venice. It's now called the shark tooth capital of the world, self-proclaimed, obviously. But they have a shark tooth festival and the whole 9 yards. And there's 4 or 5 guys down there that make a living chartering boats out and taking folks out there looking for them. I've gone with the same guy, Aristocat, charters for years, and it's a little bit addictive, and it's a little bit of a niche thing. Not everybody's into it because there's nothing else to do, because there's nothing to see down there. There's no fish, there's no marine life and anything like that. You're basically crawling along the bottom of the ocean looking for a triangle or a color. So that was what it is. And so last weekend was the first weekend of the season.
Now that you've been so accomplished at this because you have had a lot of success, two questions for you. When you see those other people doing what you're doing, do you kind of like a little bit of like the look of chagrin, like, oh man, they might be getting one of my treasures, kind of thing? And then that satisfying moment, you shared the story one time, it's probably happened to you more than once, but basically on this day, you'd been down there and you said, well, it's just not in the cards today. I'm headed up. And just as you're headed up, something caught your eye, and then kind of buried, hidden under something was an absolute treasure. So your thoughts on those two things? Is there
Yeah.
ever any sense of like, oh, man, I hope they don't get, something, and then share that great feeling that must have
Yeah.
been for you to find that hidden
Well,
beauty?
I've been doing it for so long. I've got a bunch of them. I never want to not see somebody not find one. And many times I will find stuff and I'll give it to them when they come because there's only probably maybe 10 or 12 of us that go down there and been doing it for years. Everybody else this is their first time kind of a thing. So usually I'll find something. And if it's not 4 inches and above, I'll give it to the people on the boat. And part of that comes from people say, how do you find so many of them? And it's what I tell folks is the more you do it, the more things you see and your eye picks up that if Anthony, if you went down there the first time and went into the water, you wouldn't see the stuff that I see. It just shapes and angles and stuff like that. And so I'll find something, I'll usually give them away on the boat. So, but every once in a while you'll go in there and somebody will say, well, I was just right over there and I was just right over there. And they'll find a 4-inch tooth and you're like, damn, because I've said this probably 100 times. I'd probably start crying if I knew how many times I swam over at some point in time a 6-inch tooth. I just didn't see it because they're not sitting on the bottom with a neon sign that says, here it is, here it is. I mean, they're covered and in angles and, you'll just see a little tip of it or stuff like that. So I've probably swam over some big teeth. I just didn't see them. Just last weekend, there was a guy on the first dive who found about a 4-inch tooth and he was in the same area that I was. Now we didn't probably go over the exact same spots, but he found one and he was telling me where it was. And I was like, damn, that was right where I was. So, so yeah, it's pretty tough, but it is addicting. I mean, you find that first one and people get hooked on it. And so now we've got a pretty regular group that will come down when we do our little dive trips. There's another guy named Ed that we lead a group down there at least once a month. And like I said, last weekend was the first one and we had, full boat in the morning and a full boat in the afternoon to go down there and do it. But, it is addictive and it is a lot of fun to find them. And I like to see when other people find them.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we talk NHL playoffs, which are going on right now, I want to kind of review the draft, the NFL draft with you. And you've, because of our friendship through the years, I mean, I never disliked the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at all, but because of our friendship, I've become, a huge Buccaneers fan. And this past year, as far as the division goes, the Falcons were the team that were getting a lot of the publicity before the season started, the so-called favorite. And they got off to a fine start, but they faded. And the Buccaneers played very well. And I think the Falcons may have even swept the Buccaneers during the season, but the Buccaneers came on at the end of the year. We were excited. We knew that it wasn't going to be easy, but if you win the division, we knew you had a home playoff game and this. And the Buccaneers came through when a lot of people doubted them last year. And I think they've done a great job this year. And I had Baker Mayfield doubts, to be honest with you, but I think they did a wonderful job with the draft. And I'm a huge Emeka Ibuka fan. And the fact that he's headed the Tampa Bay, I think, is a wonderful draft because there was a need for wide receiver, and I think they obviously knew that and they targeted that. I would think, Fred, that you've got to be encouraged off the success of the draft, coming off what they did last year as a surprise. They're not the Tom Brady when they won the Super Bowl yet, but this is a good football team.
Mm. Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. They're a good football team. They're not a great football team. They're a good football team. They're getting ready to go with a new offensive coordinator. Seems like every year or so they got a new offensive coordinator who's going to install a new playbook. But they've got a lot of weapons on the offensive side of the ball. On the defensive side, they've got some questions. They've got a kind of an interesting situation where they've got some of their great defensive players are starting to age up, getting a little longer in the tooth, and they've got to backfill those guys. And they always seem to play good offensively or good defensively, but never at the same time. And so they're a good football team. I think they'll compete for the divisional championship, which, gets them a first round bye and all that sort of stuff like that. But they always seem to just be good and not great, which to win, especially coming out of the NFC, you got to be a great football team with some of the talent that's on the NFC side of the ball. Washington's going to be good. Philadelphia is going to be good again. I think the Falcons are going to be good with a full season of Penix. So it's going to be a hard task to come out of there on the NFC side, but they're a good football team. I don't know if they're going to be great, but they've got a lot of weapons this year.
The South, it will be in particular because the Falcons are better. The Saints are even better. Carolina probably is, still got work to do. I think about the NFC West. I think the 49ers and the Rams are right there together with each other
Yeah,
because of some of the players that the 49ers have lost over the couple of years and some of the players that the Rams have added. I still like the 49ers. They underachieved this past year, and I don't think you can close the book on them, but I think you're right. I think it'll be yeah. But okay, the other I want to talk Shadir. I'm sick of talking about Shadir Sanders and people asking me about him, but I want to get your thought. And first, I'll share my opinion with you. On the fifth round deal, I think it was a combination of a couple of things. I think it was his arrogance when he talked to teams. I don't think that whole NFL colluded. I don't think you got every coach, every general manager to go in a collusion and not take him. I think he's a victim of behavior for himself. And I also would say he's probably a victim of his father some. His father is so outspoken and so I think maybe some teams were like, I really don't want him in our backyard and at some of our practices and
I
stuff
agree.
and the distraction that he could be. And I think some of that played into it as well, Fred. I think it's a combination of both of them. And I don't think it really matters if it matters money wise, but I don't think it matters given an opportunity to become a factor in the NFL. As long as you are drafted, you have the opportunity to make
Mm.
that roster, which gives you the opportunity to earn a spot. And from that standpoint, I don't think it matters if you draft in the first round, fifth round. It matters money wise. He's not hurting for money anyway. The kid did incredibly well with NIL money in
Mhm.
college. He goes into the pros with more money than any other player. He'll have his opportunities. That's my feeling on why he ended up in the fifth round. Am I on the right path there?
I think so too. I don't think it was a combination. I think it was a combination of multiple things. I mean, if you think about coaches and general managers get fired because they don't win, there's no way that 32 coaches and general managers and owners, you know, colluded to not bring in somebody. If he was that kind of talent and it was going to make you win football games and win championships, they'd have drafted him. I think Shadir is a good quarterback. I don't think he's a great quarterback. I think he's a good quarterback. But then you start layering on this stuff. And, we do this in the business world too. I mean, you start layering on good quarterback. Then you start layering on all of the circus that goes along with him. Put that on top of it. Then you lay on top of dealing with his dad on top of it. And I think a lot of these things started to weigh on it. And if you don't think, and I heard somebody saying the other day too, and this is true, there was only about 5 or 6 teams that needed a quarterback.
That's right. That's exactly
So that
right.
means 27 teams weren't even thinking about him in the first place. So the other 27 teams didn't include, didn't say, we're not going to draft him. So you got 5 or 6 teams that needed one. If you think about, and one of them automatically took Cam Ward on the first pick, so he was out. So you had 4 or 5 teams that needed a quarterback. If you thought about his skill levels, purely skill levels, and he was a good quarterback, but not a franchise quarterback. And I don't think I heard anybody say he was a franchise quarterback. He's a good quarterback. Then you start thinking about if he's going to be a backup quarterback, let's say he's going to be your number 2. Do you want to deal with all the other stuff for your backup quarterback and dealing with the social media aspect and his father injecting himself periodically via social media about why is my kid not playing? I hate it for him because obviously I don't think we've ever seen a player come out into the draft with all of the other stuff that he had in
Right.
there. And then I do think there was a little bit, and I don't know him, couldn't say anything about him personally at all. But there is that persona of entitlement and, legendary and all this kind of stuff. Now, his dad's a legend, one of the best football players and best athletes ever to walk the planet. But that's stolen valor if you're saying you're legendary when you haven't backed it up. And so, not to say that he won't get that way, but no. And so I think there was a combination of his attitude, his arrogance, all the other layers, and he's a good quarterback, not a great quarterback. Now, he's gone into Cleveland. And if there's a situation that's better than that, I don't know what it is, because he's going to sure get an opportunity to prove whether he was misrepresented in the draft, because there's not anybody on that team besides maybe Joe Flacco, who's 117 years old. And so he's going to get an opportunity to prove it in the summer practices and the preseason. And I wouldn't be overly surprised if he moves up that depth chart pretty quickly, and we'll find out whether he was. And you know what? If he needs motivation, getting drafted 144th
Uh,
on there. There
yeah.
ain't any better motivation than that, I don't think.
I was joking with a friend. I said, like, yeah, basically what you said. Of course, you can take it out on teams that didn't draft him. But then I started thinking, like, well, Cleveland passed on him like four times too
That's
before they took
right.
him. So, but I think it is ludicrous. It's totally fair for me to say this. You got Democratic politicians out there saying is racism was because of it, and I think that is completely ludicrous. The first overall draft pick was black. So many other black quarterbacks have been taken in the first round through the years, and I think that
Jalen was picked before him,
yeah, so I think it
So,
just takes Jalen Milroe. That's right.
yeah.
I just think it takes away like when things are really racism, when people put out here when things clearly are not racism. I have to ask also, speaking of another Jalen, deeply disappointed in Jalen Hurts for
Mhm.
not going to the White House. University of Alabama, Devontae Smith did not go to the White House to celebrate the Eagles championship. These UGA football players that we always hear about, Nolan Smith, Jacoby Dean, Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, none of them went to the White House to celebrate the championship. I'll tell you who did go. CJ Uzama from Auburn went to the
Mhm.
White House to celebrate the championship. Obviously, Saquon Barkley, the offensive MVP of the NFL, was there because he golfed with Trump the day before. Why do these play? This is very disturbing to me. I think it's a great honor to be invited to the White House, no matter who the president is. I salute those who did go, even if they don't agree with Trump's politics. Some of them obviously do agree with Trump's politics. And I'm very disappointed. There's a guy named Rick Carl on Facebook, always says Rick Carl, good news. He
Mhm.
always praises Jalen Hurts for everything. I'd like for him to praise CJ Uzama for
Yeah, yeah.
going to the White House. He don't necessarily have to like say anything negative about Jalen Hurts not going, but why don't we praise who did go to the White House?
Well, and if you saw what Saquon Barkley said, he said, I went for the respect of the office. And
That's
we've
right.
lost a little bit of that. Now, some of it is self-inflicted, because we've lost respect for the presidential office over the last maybe decade or so. But if you think back to when the championship teams won, they showed up, they all had suits and ties on and the whole 9 yards. I know we're in a different time, so this is not grumpy old man sitting on the porch kind of a thing. But it's the respect for the office of the president. I got invited back in the fall to do a behind the scenes tour in the White House and got to the Oval Office and stuff like that. Well, everybody knows what side of the political spectrum I'm on. And I could have said, well, I'm not going because at the time Biden was the president. I'm not going. I would never go in and stuff like that. But it was the opportunity and the respect to go to the White House and get a behind the scenes tour, not the public tour, behind the scenes tour. There was somebody who was doing a fellowship up there, and I got to go in the Oval Office and stuff like that. I went because of the respect of the office and the opportunity to go there, not because I supported one person or the other. I think it's unbelievably short-sighted to not go to the White House and be recognized in that sort of format just because you don't like the current person in there. That's just stupid.
Yeah. We'll have to, I just thought about this. We'll have to throw up a picture of two up there because you had some fabulous photos of you at the White House also.
Yeah, yeah.
You don't share too much on Facebook, but you did share that. And I don't blame you a bit
I
because
mean,
that's
how often do
monumental.
you get to go to the Rose Garden? I mean, seriously. I mean,
You don't get those
no.
opportunities. So if
Mm-mm.
you do, it was kind of like me going to the Final Four this year. Now I had to like do a lot to make that happen, but you have to go if you have that kind of opportunity because you never know. You might not ever. Chances
No.
are you won't. You
Mm-mm.
won't get that ever. There's conflicts and seasons that you don't occur. All right. So before we get to the hockey, this whole transfer portal is necessary for Auburn hoops because it is mass exodus, even players that don't have eligibility. And I'm really looking at Chad Baker Mazar, and I have to ask you, and this is a little hard for you because you're a big Auburn supporter, and obviously you've had season tickets for years and years. The rumor out there is Chad Baker left because of some of the players that came in were getting more money than him on this whole name, image, and likeness, which I hate. And Auburn didn't up it, and Auburn should have. However, he had signed a contract to come back and play for Auburn for one more year. How do you come down on this? Is this good? Is this kind of like a marriage that's finally good to split? And like a good Shakespeare term, good riddance. He gave us that term, good riddance. Or did Baker Mazara give Auburn the shaft, or did Auburn give him the shaft? How do you perceive this?
Wow, we could probably do a whole show on that plus NIL. I mean, yes, it has become unsustainable NIL. With that being said, these kids and the system that they live in now is the system that they live in now. And he felt like he was worth this much. Auburn says, we're going to pay you this much. He got a better offer to go someplace else. At the end of the day, he was a great basketball player. It seemed like in some of the key moments, he didn't shine. And so if I'm the coach and I'm looking at the kids that are coming in through the portal and the ones who are not threatening, but talking about leaving, at some point in time, you wonder if the staff says, we'd love to have him, but if he can make more money and we've got somebody coming in as good or better for the amount of money that we're willing to pay for it, you got to let him go. So it's the end of a relationship. It's probably, I hate to see him go because he brought a lot to the table, but then there was the other stuff that, he seemed to always be, tangled up in. And if you've got a replacement coming in that's as good or potentially better, and you're getting it for the price tag that you're willing to pay, you got to let them go. And unfortunately, this is the world of that NIL that we're living in now. And I don't know how long it's sustainable, but I tell you what, I wouldn't want to be especially basketball coach, because you only got 10 guys. Football, you got 80 some odd players. But it seems like every year these coaches are out there completely turning over their rosters every year.
They have to re-recruit their own players.
Yes, and recruit their own players. Yes, no doubt.
And go back just a second. I know you're not a huge Ohio State fan, but practically the entire team went to the White House to celebrate their championship, including guys who had no more eligibility who were drafted just the other night.
Sure. Yeah.
Also, I thought that was including Abuka, who's headed to Tampa. I mean, he was right there. Travion Henderson, who has no more eligibility. Will Howard, Jack Sawyer. I could go JT Tuamula. I could go all these guys are just drafted. They went, and I think that was awesome. You said something too that I want to get a comment on before we get to the hockey. The name, image, and likeness. Deion Sanders says now that we need to reel this in and control. It's very rich for him to say that now that Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders have left and moved on. Now we need to do something about name, image, and likeness. Now these two stars have left and gone. I can do without that. I mean, he's right. We have to do something about it.
Yeah, they do.
But I can do without that comment then.
Yeah, it's a little bit disingenuous when he's the one out there promoting we need to do something about it after he took advantage of it, obviously. His son and Hunter, who's well deserving of it, it absolutely made a ton of money. But it's a little bit hard to understand when kids can stay in college because they didn't get their draft appraisal wasn't high enough and make more money than going into the NFL. That's a tough concept. I don't blame the kids for doing it because it's the environment we're in. I get it. I would do the same thing. But something's wrong when you say, you know what, I'm not going to go play for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this year because I can make more money staying in college.
Yeah.
That's tough.
So the hockey playoffs are ongoing, and each time, the last 5 years, all but 1 year, this time, because my New York Rangers are either eliminated early or, like this case, they didn't make the playoffs, I have to hook my star to the Tampa Bay Lightning's wagon. And the Lightning, Fred, they were playing so wonderful coming into the playoffs. They made some just tremendous moves at the trade deadline. Now, they had a tough draw in the opening round. The defending Stanley Cup champions, the Panthers. I mean, the Panthers are amazing. There's a rivalry. Now, I'm trying to watch this as my sports writing days and trying to, instead of with the bolts, glasses, so to speak. But all that being said, some of what the Panthers have been in this series is very difficult for me to accept, and they've gotten away with a lot of it. There's no doubt that they want to destroy Hagel, and they'll do it at whatever cost is going to happen. Now, to their credit, they came back and won a pivotal Game 4 that is going to be make it just Herculean for Tampa to win this series. Now they're down 3-1, and that's not their fault. Their dirty play that's keeping the Lightning from being effective in the power play. And Andre still hasn't been Andre. Now he could turn that, and the series is still possible. It's not going to be easy, but I have not been happy with the way this game has been officiated and about what the league has also done with it. And I know Cooper is frustrated, and he has every
Mhm.
right to be. That's, of course, the coach of the Lightning.
Yeah, I mean, to start off, I mean, you and I were going back and forth a couple of weeks ago where we said, boy, I don't think anybody wants to play the Lightning when the playoffs started because they were on a roll. I mean, they were scoring 5, 6, 7 goals a game and stuff like that. But we also know from following hockey for all these years, playoff hockey is different than regular season hockey. It's much more physical. It's tighter. Shots on goal go way down in the playoffs and stuff like that, which I think the Lightning, for whatever reason, peaked maybe a month a little bit too soon. And this change to more physical and tighter games hurts a team that scores a lot of goals when they start tightening it up. The physicality, it gets more physical, but there's a fine line between being more physical in the corners and some of the things that we have seen in the last couple of games as it relates to especially the Panthers checks and some of the hits that they've delivered, especially on Hagel. Clearly he's been targeted because he had to put a pretty good hit on one of his kids, on one of their kids. But it's been difficult. Now, I would also say that they are the defending Stanley Cup champions. They are very physical. They're taking advantage of that advantage that they have over the Lightning. The Lightning forever have never been a really physical team. They had Vasilevsky who stopped every shot on goal, and they had 3 or 4 guys who were going to be Stanley Cup Hall of Famers in the next 5 years who just scored a lot of goals, and that's how they won the games. They didn't have to be overly physical because they could score 3 goals. Vazzy was going to hold them to 1. They won the game. Now Vazzy is a little bit off, and he's getting hockey old. Obviously, he's not old, but he's gotten hockey old, and he's not probably in his peak anymore as well. I don't think the defense is quite as deep. Hedman's obviously there, but he's hockey old. And I think there's just a fine line between being a good team, and we talked about this with the Bucks. There's a difference between being a good team and a great playoff team in hockey. And they just seem to be in. And then obviously, I think a couple of the calls that, but they had a 5, they gave him a 5-minute major. He sat, well, actually, he was out of the game. And they had a 5-minute power play and didn't get a shot off. Now, I'm not saying they would have won the game had they got a shot off, but for 5 minutes, they had an opportunity to put one more goal on there. That horrible 11 seconds where Florida scored 2 goals in 11 seconds and won the game would have never happened had they scored in 5 minutes.
Now, if you're up 3-1, Florida's having to press in a different
That's
manner,
right.
and you're right that you win that game, and it's hard because as well as they played in Game 3, they didn't play bad. Lightning didn't play bad in Game 2. The power play was not effective, but it was certainly a winnable game. I have no excuses for them in Game
No,
1. Florida
no.
took it to them, and they should have never gave up the home ice
No.
advantage, so to speak, so quick. They are capable of winning
Yeah, yeah.
3 games in a row, but people like Kucherov and Braden Point, who I'm very high on, they got to help out somebody like a Jake Gensel, who's doing tremendous work for the Lightning. A great addition to this team, by the way, when you've lost people like a Stamkos and some of the other players that have
Yep.
gone. But I need to see more of Kucherov, and I need to see more of Braden Point, a couple other players too.
Yeah, Kucherov has disappeared. I mean, there was a thing on there. I was looking this morning on social media. It said it was one of those milk cartons missing. If you know where he is, call, and it has his picture on it. And so, he's taking a kind of a beating in the social media press in Tampa about where the hell's he been, because you can't have him not play well, because he's obviously is a linchpin of that team, has been for 6 or 7 years, but. Yeah, the offense is confounding because they were the highest scoring team in the NHL. They scored the most goals of any team in the NHL. And boy, I tell you what, they can't, other than just the other night where they scored several goals. They just don't look. It seems like they go in, get a shot, and then it's back out again. You don't see them controlling the puck. Even in that 5-minute power play, they didn't control the puck. And how's that possible?
In fact, Florida got shots, I believe, on goal during the power
Right.
play, not
Right.
Tampa, but Florida. I do think they still have. I do still believe they have a chance, and I'm going on all that I saw at the end of the regular season, and I also believe in Cooper. Okay, I think he's the best coach in
Yeah.
hockey. And we haven't even mentioned other teams. The East is stacked. Toronto is actually my pick
Mhm.
to win it all before the season started. And this is a team that's been having no luck in the playoffs for the last,
No.
10 years. They've underachieved, but I really like their team a whole lot. The Capitals have come, have made drastic strides. Obviously, let's give the Panthers their due. It was just a couple of years ago, the Boston Bruins were threatening to set the best record in hockey in all time. And the Panthers erased a 3-game-to-1 deficit in that series
Mm-hmm.
with them and
Yeah.
eliminated them. Boston's not even in the playoffs this year. Last year, the New York Rangers had the best record in the NHL. We call them the President's Cup winner. They didn't qualify for the playoffs. That's how stacked the East is, Fred.
No, it is. And you look at the Lightning, Vinnick sold the team. There's a new ownership transition. That team's getting a little bit long in the tooth. Cooper's now been there for 14 years. It'll be interesting to see if they don't come back and win, which I think they can. It's going to be, I think you should call it Herculean. It's going to be hard for them to come back. But it'll be an interesting offseason as Vinnick's cycling himself out of the ownership. The new owners are coming in, and some of these players getting a little bit hockey old. It'll be interesting to see what happens to the Lightning moving forward.
Will you throw down the gauntlet and go tomorrow night, or would you wait till Game 7 and go to a Game 7? What's your
No,
plan there?
I will probably try to go tomorrow night just because it could be the last game of the year. So, yeah, because you don't want to roll the dice down 3-1 and hope that you get another crack at it. So I'll probably go. I haven't reached out to Dave yet about it, but I'll probably reach out to him.
We need you to hold up one of those signs that say "Not in our house." Like not happening tonight. No celebrating, but the passion. It's going to be whenever the series ends. It's going to be a very interesting handshake line at the
Mm.
end of the
Oh,
series.
yeah.
This is one of the great traditions in hockey. The teams can beat up on each other for 5 games, 6 games, 7 games, whatever, but they still go down the line and shake hands. This one might be a little confrontational because of some of what we've seen, though.
Yeah, we might see the first victory handshake line where somebody gets a penalty. A five
That's
minute fighting penalty in the handshake line.
You did say something about playoff hockey and the physicality. There's a lot less fighting in the playoffs where they put the gloves down and they fight than in the regular season, but the physicality of the
I
hits and
agree.
all
Yeah,
progresses
I
greatly.
agree.
And I used to believe that the players would wait and see what the officials would let them take. They were almost watching what the officials would do and see how much they would let them get away with. Now I think it's just like, hey, if I get a 5 minute, I get a 5 minute, but I'm taking this guy off the ice. I'm going to make them play with 10 forwards instead of 11 forwards, or I'm going to make them play with one less defenseman. I think they equate, some of that. Is it worth it and all? And I don't know. I don't think that played a part in the game. The game 4 lost the fatigue factor, but I would have loved for Tampa to have their full arsenal for the whole 60 minutes of game.
Yeah, like I said, that 11 seconds, I don't think I can remember an 11-second period of time that changed the outcome of the season in 11 seconds potentially.
Because following up on that, you're looking at the series being tied at 2 and Tampa getting back home ice
Yep.
instead of being down 3-1 and having to win 3 games against the defending Stanley Cup champs. Now, the pushback on that is 2 of those 3 games, if they can get there, will be at home. And then
Yep.
Florida people can say, well, we've won first 2 games in Tampa
Right.
anyway.
Right.
So, but you have to take, when you're in a situation like this, you have to take it one game at a
That's
time.
right. I actually think they're going to win tomorrow night.
I do too. I think they'll be very impressive. Actually, they're going to get Tampa's best shot. Florida will get Tampa's best shot. Fred, I really appreciate you taking time, open up season 16 with me. We'll have you back in a few episodes. We generally do that as well.
Okay.
But thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, as always.
For Fred Blatchford in Tampa, Florida, and Jake Barton, I'm Tony Jones. We'll see you next time right here on Talking with Tony.